Well, hello, my name's Lisa Cherry and I'm your host on this amazing podcast, which is called Trauma, Resonance, Resilience. I almost forgot there the name of the podcast. How terrible is that? But that's because, as usual, I'm really excited. So let me introduce you to who we're going to be speaking with today. And you'll know, so people often say to me, oh, I love those boys. That's what they say to me. I love those boys. So if you're listening, you might already know who I'm talking about. So Smash Life, formed by Matt and Andy Smith, who spent their childhood in the care system. The brothers were unfortunately abused in care, but have spent a combined 40 plus years working in various roles in social care to ensure their past pains have been used as a purpose to be a listening ear, voice, and advocacy for many children navigating through their own care journey now. Both are being who they needed when they were younger, and Smash Life is an award-winning company that leads from the heart. Welcome, Matt and Andy Smith.
How are you doing, everybody? You doing okay? Nobody can answer me, can they, apart from you, Lisa? How are you?
I'm good, and it's so good to have you here. And Andy.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a privilege to come on and chat to you. Thank you.
So you'll know potentially, if you've listened to any of my podcast conversations, that it's not a very orderly event, really. I just kind of have a chat with you and get to know you a bit and find out, you know, what makes you tick and what you do, motivation, and actually what some good practices, because that's what the podcast is really about, and thinking about recovery from trauma. So I love the notion of taking things that happen to us, recovering from those things, and then trying to do something with them that helps other people. And I guess that's the essence of you, isn't it? So where would you say this whole journey began?
So if you're talking about a journey, a life journey, it obviously began, as children, going into care, having them decisions made for us, having it very much like a roller coaster childhood where we didn't really know what was going on, didn't really have a positive connection with many people, was very angry, very confused. And I think we both reflect quite a lot now and think a lot of that empathy and that drive to do what we do now came from those childhood moments and feeling frustrated. And I think a lot of that now guides us within what we do within Smash Life. And we set up about 4.5 years ago, and because it was the right time for us both to come together, and even talking together, in conferences and doing training, it's the right time for us to probably understand each other as well, and each other's perspectives of what happened to us as children. I'm not sure if you'd agree there, Matt.
I've got a slightly different take on it. I think the journey has been the journey, and we're here at the moment in that journey, which is great. But I think if you've gone through any hardship in your life, whatever that may be, whether you've been in care, whether your mum and dad divorced as a child, whatever trauma it may have been, I believe you develop, well, we certainly have a degree of empathy that we don't want any other child to not necessarily feel what we went through, because we can't control that, but we want them to know that there are people out there that will put their arm around them when they need it, tell them that they believe in them, and say, yeah, it might be tough now, but there are lighter days ahead. And that's what we didn't have growing up. We had it a little bit from some professionals, and one of which we can talk about later, who's got in contact with us and is the only professional to apologise to us about what's happened, because our corporate parents didn't take any responsibility. And that's still the case now. But I think, if anything, it's taught Andy and I from a very young age about empathy. And people go on about having resilience and driving resilience into young people. I'm sorry, a lot of young people have been through a lot of stuff, and for them to just turn up every day through those doors at school is a resilience enough for me. And it's up to us as practitioners to actually get off our backsides, be trauma informed, and to actually get down on their level and to understand that not everybody's worlds are these middle class kind of leafy suburb existence, and that there is stuff going on out there. I told you I was controversial, Lisa. So I hope that answers it for you.
Matt, there's nothing controversial about asking adults who work with vulnerable children to step up and do what needs to be done. You know, that's what any of us who go out there talk about. That's what any of us are trying to do. We're trying to make sure that people understand that for some children, relational wealth is not a luxury. It's essential. It's the thing that's going to make the difference, and it's the stuff that's going to last across the life course. One of the things I'm interested in, though, is talking to you as brothers, because I hear two very different kind of approaches, comprehensions, ways of making sense of. And I love that. I love that in thinking about that. Which one of you is the youngest? Andy, I'm going to guess it's you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that kind of, that, yeah, you're a little bit lined, Matt, to be honest, but that kind of comes across because I wonder if, you know, we have different experiences. Sometimes people say to me, you know, oh, my kids, they're so different, but they have the same parents. But actually, we arrive into the world with our own dispositions, our own unique ways of being in the world, and then there's all the things that happen to us within relationship. And I'm curious about how that really works with you, because I'm hearing you, Andy, be perhaps really upbeat and kind of positive about everything, and I'm hearing you, Matt, say, yeah, that's lovely, but you know, there's a kind of deeper level going on here, and I'm wondering how that plays out in your work.
Well, if we see Smash Life as a company, which is what it is, Andy's the face of it. You know, he's the person you'd stick out front, Prime Minister, because he's brilliant with people, and we know that. You know, he's really good. He's got a great energy, and that's not to say that I haven't, but I am a deep thinker. I think growing up, I saw a lot of the stuff that Andy was sheltered from because he was too young to remember. And those sort of things do form who you are as you get older. It doesn't mean I don't know how to let my hair down and have a good time. I can chill out, but there is a frustration after 20 odd years of working in the field that some people, we're still having to spoon feed some of these people that should know better, in my opinion, some of these really simple, not rocket science kind of theories, because they just don't get it. And it's frustrating. So for me anyway, I mean, I see a lot of great practice, don't get me wrong, and things are changing, and you're part of that, Lisa, so thank you. But I just, for me, when I go in and I see it, because Andy and I, and this is something different, and I'm going to say it, we're on the ground, we're doing the work, we're mentoring young people. We supported nearly 500 young people in Smash Life alone. So when people go, what do you two know? The first barrier we got was, what qualifications do you have? And I felt like we were having to prove ourselves in their kind of like that kind of sphere. And then you get over that and they're like, well, what do you know? You're not young anymore. You left the care system in 2006. But I'm still on the ground and I'm still talking to young people, and we're still listening and capturing their voice. And they're telling us the same things year in, year out. And it does keep that fire in me very much alive.
Yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? The hierarchy of knowledge. I mean, it's something I talk about a lot. Yes, I love academic knowledge. Yes, I absolutely value with huge amounts of passion, professional expertise. But yes, I also want to see lived experiences, whatever those are, because those are, when we acknowledge what we've experienced, and we can do that safely, then we show up authentically. And when we show up authentically, we've got more hope of having some connection with another person. And I guess that's what you're talking about. You know, it's those, what are those barriers, you know, that people put in the way when actually what you're talking about now is 20 years working on the ground. A qualification couldn't have given you the lived experiences that you have, the recovery from it, and what you've then done with young people and how you continue to work. So I think there's something there for people to really reflect upon.
What do you think, Andy? Have you got any thoughts to add to that, bro? Because I noticed that I took over there. Sorry.
Yeah, it's the older brother again, isn't it? You have to respect the hierarchy, don't you? But for me, you know, I see all these approaches coming out and these theories, but my approach hasn't changed over the years. You know, I knew within Connection, I had to be a little bit vulnerable, and working in the leaving care team when I left university, it was very much, you can't tell these children about your past. And I was, you know, it was almost looking at people thinking, I'm not going to sit down and, you know, offload to them like they're my therapist. But, you know, if I meet a 15-year-old boy or 16-year-old boy who's very angry, then, you know, it's almost like a mini version of me that I can actually connect with them at a level and say, do you know what, I was going through that as well, and I took that course and it didn't go right doing that, you know, and almost a guide. And that's the way I, you know, I look at how vulnerable I could be to actually show them that the future can be more positive if you make more informed decisions and listen to people, where no one really wanted to sit down with me as a child and just be human, but also have a bit of fun and just think outside the box and connect. And we always say this, our mentors, us, you know, we always say, when you turn up with children, just have that boot full of anything, be prepared for any kind of situation that might happen. You know, don't just turn up with what you want to expect out of that session. So for me, I feel like my approach hasn't changed. Yes, I've got more awareness. There's so many people that inspire me that I'm like, oh, perhaps we should put that into our service. But I found that just actually caring about children, just being the energy sometimes, being vulnerable, advocating for them, I feel that hasn't changed with myself, both Matt and I, you know, since we both started working with children.
I started working in leaving care. That's where I went after uni as well, and I loved it. But you know, that whole kind of fear around professional boundaries and showing up authentically was indicative of my whole professional life. That, you know, and I can only put that down to one thing, and that's stigmatization, and that in that kind of systemic stigmatization that I would say still exists, but is better, around working in practice when you share some of the lived experiences of the people that you're working with. And I wonder what your feelings and thoughts are around stigmatization towards people, particularly with care experience.
Yeah,
I think, sorry, Andy, you go first, bro.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I think for me, I was knocking on doors of councils many years ago going, right, I've got this idea, I feel like we could do this lived experience mentoring, we could do that. The amount of people that just didn't respond, or just say, we've got our own services, and they were services which I thought, okay, they're great, but they haven't got the magic ingredient of, you know, that shared experience, that lived experience, which I know can gain a connection doing it every single day. And you know, we work very closely with one particular virtual head who actually, when we started Smash Life, approached us, and you know, it was like a breath of fresh air. You know, the amount of people that wouldn't even email back or message back, and but the passion was there, and I wouldn't stop. But I found it very frustrating, you know, with just these attitudes, which was almost that closed door. But one thing I found about a lot of people that have gone through adverse experiences, we're very resilient. We won't give up, and we'll find a way. And I'm pretty sure you can add to that, Matt.
I think you've got to strip it back again. So Andy and I are both males in a very female-dominated industry. Let's just say it how it is. It is. But this industry needs more male role models in it. It really does. Because you look at the number of referrals, you know, and what are they always asking for, Andy? Needs a male role model, needs a role model. Now that can come in many forms, whatever you want to identify as, I get it, because we're in changing times. But I believe that a lot of these young people that we're working with do need a male role model. And I'm not just saying for the young lads either, I'm saying for the young girls, because they're able to ask Andy and I questions like, well, how's this going to come across if I do this and do that, you know, especially with social media, and we can give them that older brother kind of like advice and say, like, has no one told you, you know, if you send something out on the internet, you know, that might affect your future employment. No, they don't discuss this at school because it's really awkward for some of these people, and they don't have the skill sets and they don't want to bring people in. Or we might have covered it in 10 minutes in our life lesson. Oh, fantastic. So don't worry, we'll have that conversation now. So also, when we're talking about stigmatization, I think we need to look at social workers and the connotations that label, that word gives off. And that is a barrier to actually forming those connections, those relationships, and getting underneath that trauma that that young person might be carrying in order to overcome. And I think social workers are up against it. I've said it for years, social workers need to be rebranded. The name social worker needs to go because it's had its time. We need to think of new ways in which we can, you know, the systems that are in place, they need to change within them. So I put a post up the other day about buildings, and it's been covered before. So Lisa, you talk a lot about relationships and trauma informed. Let's look at some of the buildings that we're sending young people into 6 hours a day, 30 hours a week, 120 hours a month. Let's have a conversation, but no one wants to have a conversation about it. Oh, it's for their safety. Jimmy Savile, Don Blaine, pedos everywhere. It's like, if we're going to really unpick trauma and we're going to really talk about developing relationship practice, and we need to talk about, like Andy said, showing our vulnerability, having honest and open conversations about racism, porn, everything that's going on in the world that young people can get by pressing a few buttons on their phone, but you don't think it's going on. So do you see where the passion comes from for me? Because I think we are a vital service. So when people say mentoring, nah, what's that? It's cute, isn't it? Well, that's actually vital because some of those young people are getting stuff that they don't have from any other adults in their life.
I think that relational poverty is really misunderstood. I think there's something about how hard it is for people to really think about what it is to have no one. So people don't think about it, because if you spend time thinking about not having your loved ones, and you don't have someone who's got your back, that's really hard. And so I think there's something about how hard it is for people to acknowledge not having relationships. So therefore, if it's hard to acknowledge what that feels like and to really not just be empathic, but to be compassionate, then that's one of the barriers, isn't it? Because if you truly understand what it is, the vulnerability of being a child in care, the vulnerability of being a child who doesn't have those relationships, then you would really understand when you have that one teacher, that one mentor, that one social worker. And actually we see lots of stuff, don't we, of people, and you know, I'm going to lead you neatly into what you were saying earlier, you know, that have people back in their lives. I mean, everyone will know that Eunice is the person I talk about. You know, I talk about her in Brightness of Stars, and we have a conversation in Conversations That Make a Difference. We've done a few bits and bobs together, and I always talk about her because she bore witness to a particular period of my life, and I remembered her, which is what's really important, because let's face it, how many adults do you have in your life and you can't remember their name? You know, so tell me a bit about the person who came back into your life and what the context was and what feelings that brought up as well.
Go for it, Andy.
Yeah, so when we were searching for our forever family, we had a social worker called Sarah, and she was wonderful. And I think, you know, I always say this to children, we have cards such as, you know, our Smash Life cards and thank you cards and birthday cards to celebrate milestones. And we always say to children, remember to say thank you to people along the way, because even though you might think they're an idiot or, you know, they didn't bother and things, it's actually, you might want that opportunity one day to say thank you, and you might miss that opportunity, which I did when my teacher died, my old head of year. And the only reason I didn't go back into that school is because I used to read my old report, and I used to think, oh, but Mrs. Lewis didn't like me in English, and Mr. Goodright didn't like me in science, because I could read it. I read what they said. But Sarah was someone that we could tell who cared, you know, even down to things like little tags on our suitcases when we went to our forever home, our life story work. a booklet that she did for us, which describes, about the people that we're moving into, which was quite ironic, because a lot of the stuff that, they claimed to enjoy, we never actually did with them as children living there. And we didn't hear from her. Obviously, we left care. And so you're talking 30 odd years later. I'm sat in my living room with my family, not last October, the October before, and I've got a message on my LinkedIn, and basically it was off Sarah saying I've kind of put 2 and 2 together, and I realised I was the social worker that placed you, and it's haunted me for years, the decision that I've made. And for me, that's the first apology we've had in 24 years, where someone's actually stood up as an adult and said, I think I've made a few failings here. And I went upstairs and, started crying. It just literally just hit me like a punch, really. And we both spoke about it. And my initial reaction was, I want to meet her. I want to have an honest conversation with her, but I also want to give her a hug as well and say, you still made us feel great in some ways. You've made mistakes, but you're still human, and we forgive you, and time's been a great healer. And she said she was really nervous, which naturally, meeting 2 blokes as a woman coming, met us in this pub in Shrewsbury, but we both gave her a hug. And for us two, we could tell she cared. And and I know you've got kind of the same views as well, haven't you, Matt?
Yeah, people might forget what you said, they might forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And she made us feel special, not just a number on her ever increasing caseload, or whatever you want to use terminology. And being, like you said, Lisa, about we were in poverty, relationship poverty, because our mum and dad had given up on us. We'd then gone into a foster family that were lovely for 2.5 years, but we were then rejected by another family who didn't want to look after us after being introduced to them. So Andy and I developed, I would say, well into our adulthood, those people-pleasing kind of traits that you find in people that don't have that containment when they're children. And you sort of notice it. Why am I desperate to be liked? Why am I gravitating towards those people? Why do I seek their approval? And then you get to an age where you think, I don't care anymore. And it's so liberating and free. But Sarah is brilliant. We've met up with her. We're still in contact with her. She's a friend. I came to her as a friend. And she said the problem back then was I had a relationship with you guys, Andy and Matt, but I was also the social worker for the adults that were abusing you. And the waters got muddied and I should have kept them separate. And she admitted that. And I said, well, thank you for being open and honest. And do you know what was great, Lisa? It was great for Andy and I to actually ask an adult that we've never been able to before, what were we like as children? What were we like? Because I've got no reference point, apart from my life story work, but no one to sit down to and go, actually, you made me laugh that one Christmas, or you did this. So that was lovely, for us to, it was great. And yeah,
I love that. And it's really interesting because I remember when I met up with Eunice, she said, you were always going to do this. You were always going to do this. There was no question. And to know that you're being your authentic self, you're living out the life that you were supposed to live out, because that's the person you were at 14, 15, 16, whatever. That's a very beautiful thing to hear, isn't it?
I mean, there's so many stories within our story, like there is with a lot of people who have gone through the mill, that are still having an impact as our adults. We've had our real biological mum follow us on social media, and we've had our real dad rock up to my band gigs, and you just have to deal with that as an adult. There's no corporate parent that I can ring up at 35, 36, 40. Hey man, how do you change a tire on a car? The support really does end at the end of the leaving care team, and things are getting better. I think Andy and I have just done a project with Dudley Care Leavers, where we've gone in and done a post-16 project with a load of young people who are at that 16, 17, probably nervous about what's going to happen. And we've gone cooking. We've told them about our story. We've told them that we've given them help around finance. Andy's done a talk about, because he got into loads of debt after school and college. And just to hear that, like you said, that relationship, like I can relate to those two people because I'm at that stage now and we're saying, don't go down the same pitfalls as we did. You know,
But I love Dudley. They're fantastic. You know, they interviewed me, the young people, on their podcast. They're fantastic. They're honestly, big shout out to Dudley care leavers. Absolutely.
You need to get a lady on this podcast, Rosemary. She's incredible. She works, doesn't she, Andy? Is she the deputy virtual assistant?
Deputy virtual head, Rosemary Jones, and she's amazing. And do you know what? I would drive home every time after one of these sessions in Dudley, and I'd almost feel a bit sad, deflated, because I'm still seeing the same attitudes. Like suddenly you're an adult at 16. You know, I saw people dropping kids off from care homes and saying things like, you'd be lucky if they last 45 minutes. You know, and when I got told that, I just wanted to follow that person out to the car park and say, you're the problem, mate. You're the problem here, because we're all supporting these children. We're all meant to be coming from the same angle, and it takes one person or one organisation to write someone off because they don't understand, or it's just a job to them. And it was really frustrating for us because we could see how crestfallen some of these children were. You know, are you chatting to your carers at night? Nah, they just don't bother with me, so I just sit in my bedroom. And a real big telling point for me is every single one of them has pretty much followed us on our social media, our Instagram, Facebook. Most of them were messaging us going, really sorry, can't make it today, guys, but no problem. Don't worry, guys. You know, just hope to see you next time. If you need a catch up, let us know. And the amount of people, when it finished, have messaged us on our social media. And these are kids, 18, 19, 20. Thank you so much, Andy and Matt. I learned this, I learned that. And it's just, for me, that's the only thanks we want to hear. Do you know what I mean? Because they felt like someone actually cared. And I knew they were taking it all on board because we were real.
Yeah. And you also highlight there the adultification of young people, which is so disturbing and so integrated into systems and policy and the way we think about things. It's actually really difficult to change. It's really difficult to shift. And I would go as far as saying we all do it. It's so embedded, and you have to notice it and shift it. You know, there's this kind of, I think because human development hasn't really been integrated into policy, so we still talk about adults at 18, regardless of what they've been through in their lives. We still think about the idea that you're an adult at 18, which of course we know that the brain is still very much forming, and until that's integrated into how we understand, and we have services really up to 25 that think about adulthood as starting at 25, then we've got a real challenge on our hands, I think.
But do you not think, and I've seen this having worked for local authorities and stuff, like one of the barriers to everything that we preach, and I'm counting us all in here, relationship, connection, all this stuff, is agendas. We're constantly battling agendas, and whether that's in a school and whether they want to look good for Ofsted. I mean, I always say this point, I'm going to say this again. When I go into a school and I see those banners that say 97% A to C's this summer, I always say to myself, I wonder where they'd score in a league of mental health tables. So where would they score themselves there amongst their pupils? Because that's the table I'm most interested in. Because I've met and supported a lot of young people, as probably we all have, who've done fantastically well in their GCSEs, but they're on, they're near to committing suicide because of the expectation and the pressure that people put upon them, and they don't care really about their welfare. It's just to make that agenda. Yes, we've met the quotas. Come on, crack open the champagne. And I think when they have, so when you talked about services being open till they're 25, I'm with you there. I'll be there all day, but it'll all boil down to money. And that's me being honest. And that's why I had to leave the local authority, because it wasn't about giving me the time to develop these relationships and really, work with a family. It was get in there, get out and save the local authority money and stop these families coming into the social care system. And that's why I left. And that's why we started Smash Life. So if a mentoring journey takes 10 sessions, great. But if it takes 20 sessions, great. great. If it takes 30 sessions, great. Now someone's going to have to pick that bill up, and it's up to us to say this is an evidence of practice that we've done with that young person. I totally get it. But underneath all that should be, it's going to take as long as it takes. And it should be the young person driving this, and not a professional going, I think those sessions need to come to an end now because they're missing double science.
Yeah, we need to be back in a place politically that actually cares about children. And that's a fairly controversial thing to say, I suppose, depending on who's listening. But, you know, I worked through the noughties, and the investment in children and families was profound. And the last
the new Labour and all that sort of stuff.
It was a very different environment. The local authority was very different. The money we had was very different. The
connections,
it was just a very, very different environment to support children, young people in, to support families, to work with the prevention agenda, and the way we worked in schools. It was just very different. And when I first started working in a leaving care team, that was very much, we were one of the first leaving care teams to respond to Section 24. So I'm going back a long time. That was 1994 or something. So, you know, we've been in a very, very particular political context for the last 13 years. And yes, it's very much driven by money, but also I would say there is a lack of commitment or interest to children. We saw that play out in the pandemic as well. We see that around the expansion of poverty. But anyway, I could go on and on about that. Listen, I've got a question as we start to come to a close, and I should have actually asked you this before, but I wondered if anywhere near you in where you're sitting, you have a guitar.
Why? What's going to happen here?
I don't. I'm Sporty Spice. Matt's Musical Spice.
Are you, Matt? I wondered if you would play us out with something. I know this is. I know. I totally should have asked you before, but I've seen a few of your videos, and I just thought that would be so nice if you just could see us out with a couple of.
Come on, Matt. You got to do it for the fans, mate. It's not about you now. You got to do it for everyone else. Come on.
I hate being put on the spot like this. So actually, to answer a question, what I thought was really nice is on that Dudley group, we met a videographer who's a young person who wants to go to university, and we saw something in him, and we shot our latest video last week during the Easter holidays. And he's playing the main character. And for me, I left there, it's a song I've written, and it's got some lovely messages in it, some mantras, I call it, that young people, if they listen to, they can repeat and go, yeah, you know. But for me, he'll hopefully look back at that video and think, yeah, that was another thing on my start of my journey. Because I've said to a lot of these young people, we want you to come back and knock on our door in 2, 3, 4, 5 years' time. When you're qualified and you're in a great place and you feel ready, come and work, come and join the movement. And that for me is going to be, like you said, Lisa, about was it the lady who was your role model? That for me would be the reward in it. Do you like how I've skirted that request?
Well, it's interesting because you haven't, because I'm going to come back to it like Billy Connolly. But I guess what I would say in answer to that, while you continue to think about whether you would play us out with at least one verse of something, I often think about young people. If social workers and educators and anyone working with young people looks at those young people understanding that they are the next lot of young people, the next lot of people who are going to be standing in front of people, who are going to be keynote speaking, who are going to be delivering the training, who are going to be writing the stuff, who are going to be doing the research. If they understand that an investment in those people is an investment in system change, I think they would be very different in their approach with those young people.
Can I say another thing as well? Go on, Andy, you go first, bro.
Andy looks so excited. Yes, he's thinking.
Yeah, do you know what? We always say this as well. You know, I speak to children with a level of respect that I believe that I'm due. You know, I walk through schools and I'm like, "You okay? How are you?" I'm literally saying hello to everyone. And it's funny, some people walk past me with their big suits on, you know, the egos, you know, carrying carpets under their arms, you know, and just won't even bat an eyelid or say hello to the little mentor from Smash Life. But trust me, some of these kids who have got nothing in their life, you know, and they'll remember what we said, and one day they'll be the service managers, they'll be the head teachers,
Absolutely,
they'll be running the show, and they will remember how we made them feel, and it will help them implement their practice as well. So we're role modeling it all the time, and people just don't see this.
Every day, Andy, every day. That's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is, because you know as well as I do that a lot of services entice people to join them who want to make a difference because they've had those experiences. So absolutely. Matt, you haven't reached for your guitar, so I'm going to let you give us some closing comments, and I'm just going to have to go away and weep and wish that I'd asked you for that. But what I will do is, if you make sure I can have a link for a piece of music that you're doing, I will put it in the show notes, and then everyone can click on there and see you in action.
Thank you. Like Andy said, role modeling the behavior we want to see. And I always use this analogy with teachers and stuff who offload to me, because there's some fantastic teachers out there, fantastic social workers, fantastic foster carers, amazing. But the ones that complain to me, I have turned around and said, be careful, because they might be the people looking after you when you're really old. And they're like, and their faces drop. But it's true, like Andy said, they might be those people making the decisions. I ran into one of our abusers last year, and one thing that I'm proud that I did, instead of going off like a bottle of pop, is I was in a calm state. I shook his hand. I was like, how you doing? May I ask you some questions? You know, it was that level of respect. And like Andy said, that's where we're coming from, a level of respect that young people, sometimes they will trigger us, they will push our buttons, and they will try and push the boundaries, but that's okay. They're just on a journey and they're learning, just like you were when you were their age. And always try and remember that. And I'll urge anybody, yeah, but it wasn't like that back in my day. Yes, it was. There were people doing exactly the same things. There's just different music in the charts, and there's different things on the TV. We've all been up to stuff. Some of us have got away with it. And I think young people now, their eyes are on them all the time. And we need to allow them to have spaces where they can chill out, have a bit of fun, and be themselves.
Listen, you've been fantastic, both of you. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And, you know, there's so many things that we could talk about, but I think we've beautifully covered relationships, connection, healing, recovery, and being the person that you would have wanted to have in your life when you were a young person. So thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.